Hello, and welcome to the Stewardship Network's monthly webcast. My name is Rob Luzinski, and I'm the community coordinator with the Stewardship Network. I would first like to give you a little introduction to the Stewardship Network before we get started with our presentation. So, a little bit about us. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization with an award-winning 20-year history. We are serving 20-plus place-based TSN member communities across the Great Lakes, with emerging presences across the country. And our free TSN webcasts happen on the second Wednesday of the month at the Eastern Time Zone's noon hour. So you can put these on your calendar and just be ready to join us every second Wednesday of the month. Our mission is to connect, equip, and mobilize people and organizations to care for land and water in their communities. So I'd like to get a little bit more into different aspects of our mission here. So we connect the specialized knowledge we've collected from and for TSN member communities, and we share it as widely as possible. We equip, we remove hurdles for TSN member communities so they can pour thousands of annual work hours into their ecosystems. And we mobilize. Through our TSN member communities, we make collaborative ecological stewardship accessible to all. So now let's dig into each of those pillars a little bit. In terms of Connect, we have a really exciting project that we're excited to tell you about. So after years of hard work from the Michigan Wild Rice Initiative, the first edition of their Manoomin Stewardship Guide is available now. It's a really incredible document. And for those of you that were at the Stewardship Network conference earlier this year, you will have noticed that we had some great conversations and content around Manoomin at the conference. So maybe you got a little sneak preview there. This is a living, evolving document and a wonderful resource for folks that are interested in the stewardship of Manoomin and wild rice. And we're excited to have supported the Michigan Wild Rice Initiative for many years, so we congratulate them on this milestone. They did a lot of great hard work to make this happen, and I'm sure that it will have a wonderful life as a resource to all of you in the stewardship community. Next, we'd like to talk about Equip. So we're going to take a quick nap, as you can see by the photo. Our Gloves for Good program has distributed 2,000 pairs of gloves at the conference this year, and 5,000 more already this year through our normal system of requests. Because of all of that, and we had encouraged folks to submit their requests early and often because we do have a limited supply, we are now quite low on supply. So we need to take a short intermission to restock and fill some incomplete orders. So we will be back as soon as possible, and trust me, you will know as soon as the Gloves for Good program is back accepting submissions. But for now, just be aware that we are not accepting new requests for gloves and that we are hoping to be back as soon as possible. Thank you all for your support of the program, and we're so conflicted because obviously we would love to keep fulfilling orders, but this means that we've been really successful in distributing a lot of gloves throughout this year so far. So thank you to everybody that has made those requests. And finally, we have Mobilize. We want to direct your attention to our TSN events calendar. And if you go to stewardshipnetwork.org/events, you can browse submitted stewardship events by date or category. And you can try the tags functionality to quickly find upcoming TSN member community events. So we encourage individuals and organizations to add your events. You can also tag them based on categories. And if you're a part of a member community network, you can tag which member community you're a part of. It's a great resource, and we hope that everybody will take a chance to both submit their events and also peruse the events that we have to offer. So once again, that is stewardshipnetwork.org/events. And as we're getting into field season, it feels like the right time to make you all aware of that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. So we have Katie Carlisle, the Chief of Natural Resources and Regulatory Compliance at Huron-Clinton Metroparks, and Jennifer Jaworski, Chief of Interpretive Services at Huron-Clinton Metroparks. And today they will be talking with us about towards sustainability, developing a towards sustainability, developing a comprehensive climate action plan. Wow, that was a mouthful. But now I would invite our speakers to join us, please. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Katie, are you able to share your screen, please?
Looks great. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. We're going to talk today, just like Rob had mentioned, towards sustainability, developing a comprehensive climate action plan. We're going to start giving an overview of the Huron-Clinton Metroparks, who we are and what our mission, vision, and values are. And then we're also going to be discussing the process of developing the climate action plan, the methodologies that we used in crafting the climate action plan, and how we involved stakeholders and the engagement of staff and other stakeholders. We're going to discuss the insights of executing the climate action plan, and then we're going to dive into some best practices and some lessons learned so we can have some inspiration and for yourself and your organization, and just sharing some really cool case studies as we dive in. So next slide, please, Katie. Rob did a great job introducing us. I am Jennifer Jaworski. I'm the Chief of Interpretive Services with the Metroparks, and I'm going to be giving the first half of the presentation, and then Katie will be taking over the second half of the presentation and focusing on the case studies and how we have implemented the climate action plan. She is the Chief of Natural Resources and Regulatory Compliance. Next slide, please. A little bit about the Huron-Clinton Metroparks. So we are located in Southeast Michigan, and we are 13 Metroparks spread over 5 counties. We're in the counties of Wayne, Macomb, Oakland, Livingston, and Washtenaw counties. So you can see geographically, we are very spread out. We are called the Huron and Clinton Metroparks. Our parks are located along the Huron River and the Clinton River. And so that's how we have gotten our name. We're 25,000 acres, and about 20,000 of those acres are undeveloped, which give us that really great opportunity to do a lot of the case studies that Katie will dive into about preservation and restoration of natural resources. We do have about 7 million visitors a year. We are a property tax funded organization, and we are extremely fortunate to have a perpetual millage. That is what goes to funding our entire system. It's also supplemented with our tolling fees that we have. We charge per vehicle as you enter the Metroparks. If you come by bike or walking, there is no fee to enter the parks in that way. And then also another arm of supplemental funds would be our operational fees, such as golf. So that's how we are funded and how we have a variety of different acres. And you can see in the slide of all the different types of recreation that we do offer for folks from primarily serving Southeast Michigan, but we do have quite a few people from all over visiting the Metroparks. Next slide, please. A little deeper dive. Rob highlighted what the Stewardship Network is all about, and our mission here at the Huron-Clinton Metroparks is to bring the benefits of the parks and recreation to the people of Southeast Michigan, all the people, all their lives. Our vision is to be unifying force, an indispensable resource in Southeast Michigan, one region, one Metroparks, and endless experiences. And our values are access, commitment, diversity, equity, leadership, and stewardship. You will see each of these pillars threaded within our climate action plan, and these were at the forefront of our thought process as we were diving into creating the climate action plan and what it means for our organization. So let's talk a little bit about how it all started. Next slide, please. So this has been a conversation that we were having for quite a few years now. This started in 2021 as part of our vision, mission, and values. We were hosting DEI speaker series, and our very first guest to speak, we invited Dr. Elizabeth Perry, Dr. Bess Perry. She is from the Michigan State University, and she spoke to, we did a lunch and learn. So our board was there, and then anyone from the community were invited to join. She spoke about climate change, parks, and inclusion, and what that means. And this really sparked the conversation at the board level through some strategic planning conversations of, we actually need to have a climate action plan for the Huron-Clinton Metroparks. But how do we go about developing this climate action plan? Where do we start? Next slide, please. So first we had to really talk about why. Why would our Huron-Clinton Metroparks need a climate action plan? Well, really diving in, as you had mentioned, or as you had heard, I had mentioned, we own 25,000 acres. We are one of the largest, or the largest landowner of public lands in Southeast Michigan. So we felt it is our due diligence to really take a look at those properties and our influence of how can we help mitigate some issues of climate in our region. So really starting at that piece. So we're dedicated on taking every possible action to help mitigate its impact on our region. We are recognizing that weather events in the corner of our region are becoming more extreme. Air and water quality are also increasingly worrisome, and it has a direct effect on people's lives. So during this time frame, our region was experiencing a lot of flooding. We were having air quality issues from fires from Canada that were actually experiencing issues where it was not quite safe to go outside because of air quality with the smoke and the particulates. And then also we've had some pretty unfortunate water quality issues, especially along the Huron River with PFAS and hexchromium coming into the Huron River. So we had to address all of those components. So taking all of that in, that's kind of establishing why we needed a climate action plan. And next slide, please. But then how did we go about it? So this gives you a timeline of when we really started to bring in those others for conversation. So we invited Dr. Bess Perry back to help facilitate and guide conversations with a steering committee of leadership folks here at the Metroparks. And then also her team was pulling different climate plans across the nation for us to do some review, really looking at what intentional efforts are we wanting to have an impact on in Southeast Michigan. What are our current actions? So what is our mission, our vision, and core values? Are there any other plans that are in place that we are drawing and connected and threading between each of those components? And then one of the largest pieces, as we were absorbing what all of that was, because that was a lot to absorb for us, it was really having those conversations with the community, really listening. That's one of our strategic plan pillars of the Metroparks, is listening and connecting. And so listening to what the community needs are, how they feel about the climate affecting them. What do the Metroparks mean to them? What does open green space mean to them? And so there were very specific questions asked for a variety of different groups of people. So we had community input focus sessions, we had staff input focus sessions, and more broad general listening sessions, and then as well as for just our board. So each board member, which we have 7 board members, also got to have a listening session with Dr. Bess Perry and her group to exercise those needs and desires and for directional input. So then what we did is we took all of that information, synthesized it, and then we brought it back to a steering committee. Next slide, please. Oh, I do want to share, we did have, for all of these different sessions, we had 4,534 voices express their thoughts on what it all means to them. So you can see here the different types of sessions. We're very spread out. The geographical reach over the 5 counties in Southeast Michigan is very large. So we had to have multiple sessions because we need to meet people where they are. And these were in-person sessions. We did a couple of virtual sessions as well, but it was really important to have that in-person session, giving everybody that voice, and also so everyone can feel heard. Next slide, please. So again, taking all of that information, synthesizing it, we came back together as a steering committee group. There's about 15 on the steering committee, 15 different staff members from a variety of different departments. So you have a complete perspective there of what the viewpoint that people can bring into the conversation. And we're trying to boil it down into categories, taking a look at ecosystem services and what that means, and how we can match it up and to give it a higher theme. So then therefore the goals can be established, and then objectives, and then of course actions. So it took a while for us to synthesize all of this information and taking a look at all of the other plans. But through this process, we were able to then address the different goals. Next slide, please. And this is what it turned out to be. So this ended up being, in 2021, we invited Dr. Bess Perry. In February, we hired her and her team to consult of February of 22. And then it took about 1.5 years for us to get to this stage, which is now the Climate Action Plan. It was approved by our board in October of 2023. And this Climate Action Plan is designed to be aspirational, but also intentional and realistic at the same time. It's a living document, which means as we move along through this process, we're going to take a look, is what we thought back in 23 when we were writing it, is that how we are still wanting to operate as things unfold? We may need to pivot and adjust based on what the data says. So what are we focusing on? We are focusing on 5 goals. These 5 goals include education and engagement, preservation and conservation of natural resources, water quality, transportation, waste management, recycling, and composting. Although we have these 5 goals, we also have a threaded main theme of finance that goes through every single one, since funding is so important to make sure that we have action on each of these pieces. So we do have a finance committee as well. So I mentioned the steering committee. There are about 15 people on the steering committee, but then talking about how are we actually moving these actions. We talked about how large we are. We are spread over quite a few distances. We have about 200 full-time employees. In the summertime, we can have up to 1,000 seasonal and part-time employees. So we have a large group of folks. We have multiple parks, multiple counties. How do we communicate out? And how do you make sure that the initiative that we had of listening and connecting is continuing to thread throughout the Climate Action Plan? So to start, instead of having a plan that's sitting on a shelf, we decided to make this an actionable piece where now we have the steering committee still meets. We meet every other month. The steering committee sets goals and intentions and discusses the different goals that are occurring, and then bringing up questions, concerns, ideating at that level, and then moving it down into the subcommittees. Each goal is laid out as a subcommittee. So for example, the education and engagement goal has a subcommittee. It has its own chair. It has its own members of that committee. it was asked that the members of that committee, we are reaching everybody, every person from every department, a person from different backgrounds of expertise, full-time, part-time, making sure you have a variety of different ages and races and different beliefs, and everybody can come together and share those ideas. Again, making sure that everybody is feeling heard and having that intentional piece, and ensuring that we slow down and everyone has that voice to be heard, and that empowers the employees. So now they feel that they can make a suggestion to a project, and we can have a conversation about it, and then maybe it will come to fruition. So that's really an important component of this climate action plan. We do have it linked on our website, so if you want to go check out our full climate action plan, you certainly can. This climate action plan is lofty, it's aspirational. It has 89 short-term actions, which is a 5-year is defined as short-term. And it has 41 long-term actions, and that's over 10 years. So 131, if I did that math right, it's aspirational in that sense. But again, a lot of these actions are threaded throughout. So we have, and Katie's going to talk about some of these case studies. In preservation and conservation of natural resources, for example, you're going to hear how education is incorporated, how finance is incorporated, how water quality is incorporated. So we do have that threading and conversation throughout. Next slide, please. So how do we do this as an organization? The subcommittees meet once a month. And again, that's to ideate, it's to be intentional, and it's to be thoughtful. We want to make sure that as each of these actions are being considered and talked about, each step of achievement of those actions are really addressed. How are we moving through that project in an intentional way, in an inclusive way, and also in thoughtful way, meaning data gathering? This is a newer piece for us at the Metro Parks. We've done a lot of programming and decision making based off of, we're an old organization. We're celebrating our 85th year. So a lot of what we have done has been done in the past, right? It's the way we've always done it, but we're really wanting to slow down and be thoughtful and think of other ways. How can we do this? How can we incorporate this into our everyday work? This is not, and this is on top of everything else that we're doing, because it is affecting everybody. So we want it to become culture in our organization, and that it takes time to do that, and we recognize that. But the only way that we are going to change that is to completely be inclusive and have everybody's voice heard. And yeah, next slide, please. So taking a look at some best practices and lessons learned. A lot of ideation has been happening, and also acknowledging that we have people from all different departments. Not everybody is, like Katie and I are natural resources or interpretive services, where we do the education of the natural environment. We have folks from finance, we have folks from IT, we have folks from maintenance and operations, and we want to make sure that we acknowledge where their starting point is. And so we've done a lot of employee surveys asking about training. Where are the gaps? How can we identify some training that everybody can be a part of? Also acknowledging that their time is rather short, and we want to kind of get it in there when we can. So we do a lot of lunch and learns like this one. Data collection and conducting audits. This was a huge one that we're still moving through. Katie's going to talk about a big one that's occurring right now with our carbon emissions and studies with that. And then also acknowledging that we need to develop standard operating procedures. We don't have a lot of these. And we are working on these as well. So again, it's a big work in progress. So even though we have the aspirational goals, we want to make sure that we're able to focus on things that we can actually get done. That was a huge piece for us in this entire climate action plan. And it makes us feel good that we can actually say, yes, we're creating that impact. And through our efforts, then we'll have that change in our region and in the culture of the metro parks to be more climate action minded. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Katie, and she's going to take some great deep dives into some case studies.
Thank you, Jennifer. So thank you for that wonderful introduction to our climate action plan. Now you know what it's about and how we got here. It's time to actually get some work done on the ground. And so that's what I'm going to go over today is, what we did in this first year, what were our successes, what were our challenges, and focus on a couple of the case studies that incorporate a lot of different goals into those projects. So that includes our carbon emissions study, our installation of natural shorelines. I'm going to talk a little bit about turf reduction and what we're calling our let it grow zones, and then also touch briefly on some tree planting projects. So when we set these goals for ourselves, speaking broadly, we want to reduce our carbon emissions. We want to increase our carbon storage. But first, we had to get to a place where we knew where we were today in order to measure our progress moving forward. So this was a big beast of a project to work on. So we brought in some help. I saw Patrick Judd was one of our attendees here on the webinar. So we're working with him at CIS and 389NM. We hired them last summer to complete a baseline analysis of the carbon stored that we have stored in the metro parks and the carbon that we're emitting. So these include 6 different points. The first one is just where are we at, like with our natural resources? How much carbon are we storing? This took a lot of quality control and inventorying on a GIS side to map out our natural communities, and then we associate each of those natural communities with a cover type. So we provided GIS data of our grasslands, forests, wetlands, forested wetlands, and cropland. We do have a couple farms, and we lease a little bit of land for farming, so that CIS and can give us a quantitative amount of carbon that we have stored in our land. Second, we want to look at the fuel assessment and carbon release from prescribed burning. Prescribed burning is an essential tool and historical method to maintain healthy landscapes, as many probably on this webinar are familiar with. So we want to look at the carbon that's the carbon emission from prescribed burning, and also relate that to if we're improving our landscapes, we can store more carbon. So kind of like how those two pieces are related together is my goal of what we might get out of that. And so that, again, that took a lot of inventorying of our burn units, providing acreages, ecosystem type, interval of burning, so that we can get a quantitative amount of carbon release from this practice. In addition to prescribed burning, we have carbon emission through fleet and equipment and through facilities. So we've been gathering data on our equipment. We've done inventories. We've gathered the amount of fuel that we're using. We've done looking at our facilities, getting gas and electric records, so they can really take all of this and put it into a dashboard for us to review and measure our progress in the future. And then I'll talk a lot more about NOMO zones in a little bit, but this one is, looking at areas, trying to reduce turf so that we're reducing emissions from gas-powered mowers. And then lastly, they're going to provide some guidance on the possibility and extent to which we might be able to transition vehicles and equipment from gas to electric, again, to decrease our carbon emissions. So this is a really big project. In addition to that, a lot of the subcommittees have been working on just other ways to collect baseline data, so inventorying our waste and recycling receptacles, our water bottle filling stations, our small equipment inventory, and as Jennifer mentioned as well, looking at surveying qualitatively staff to figure out what topics we need for training. So that were some of the big baseline data collection projects from year one. We're hoping to finish up this carbon emissions study in this summer, roughly, and so I don't have results of it yet, but I'm really looking forward to see how it progresses throughout the year. So I want to focus on a couple different areas, projects that we worked on. The first one is our natural shoreline installation. I think I also saw Bindu from MSU Extension as one of our attendees today. It's been a privilege to join and work with the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership starting last year. This brings together folks from MSU Extension, Eagle, GEI, and many different partners. Our goal is to protect Michigan lakes through conservation and restoration of natural shorelines. In 2024, we collaborated with this group to host an annual contractor training at Stony Creek Metroparks. And this should continue for the next few years. And as part of the training, we actually get to install 80 to 100 linear feet of natural shoreline every year at Stony Creek Metroparks at a very heavily used beach. So I like this example as one of our case studies because it hits so many of those different goals. It supports education and engagement. We're providing training for contractors to learn how to install natural shorelines. Alternatively, Eric Elgin from MSU Extension was the host of one of our lunch and learns for park staff, so that staff could figure out why is natural resources putting all these weeds along the shoreline. We're trying to be intentional about native species, but if you don't understand it and if you don't know why we're doing it, then you don't maybe care so much about it. So really just trying to get the story about what they are, why we're doing it, and how this ties into climate action. So this supports education and engagement. I think water quality is an obvious one. We'll get into a little bit more of that. It supports our preservation and conservation of natural resources by promoting native species. And then it also promotes supports our transportation subcommittee by reducing areas that need to be mowed within the Metroparks. So a little bit about natural shorelines and how they're related to climate action. Shoreline development is impacting Michigan's lakes, and it's causing issues such as poor water quality, erosion, loss of fish and wildlife habitat. With climate change, we're expecting higher rainfall events and increased runoff. And so establishing native vegetation along shorelines is really critical into a really easy and critical piece to improve water quality. There are many benefits to natural shorelines and native vegetation. It slows the stormwater runoff as it moves towards lakes, and it allows water to soak into the ground. If you imagine turf grass versus deep-rooted native plants, those deep-rooted native plants are be able to bring the water right down into the ground, whereas turf grass, it will just flow right over it into the lake. So really helps infiltrate some of that water into the ground before going straight to the lake. It also these deep-rooted native plants also help protect lake edges from wave and ice erosion. And it provides a really critical habitat zone for wildlife. During the lunch and learn that Eric Elgin did for us as part of the climate action plan, he was talking about the turtle test. The turtle can't get from the water to the shore. It can't lay its eggs. So the turtle test, is there a seawall in the way, or is it just a gentle slope of native plants? So it provides really critical habitat for wildlife. And so here are just a few pictures of that project. So on the top left, we have Eric and Brian out there who were the teachers of the course. This is kind of a before photo, although the turf has already been sprayed in preparation for the project. So you can see it's just turf grass going up to the water's edge. And then we installed about 15 to 20 feet wide buffer of native plants. Core logs at the edge, backfilled with soil, put down erosion blankets, seeds, plugs, and a couple of trees. And then on the right, you see the after photo of a lot of native plants, black-eyed Susans, goldenrods. Our oak trees are out there, pretty small in the background still. But what I want to point out about this slide is that there was a lot of collaboration that happened to get to this point. So it wasn't just natural resources picking a random 80 linear feet of shoreline. It was a lot of talks with park staff, maintenance staff, communications, and just figuring out what worked for the park as well. This is a pretty popular beach, and they need to maintain sightlines for safety and lawn for watching fireworks. So it was a lot of collaboration that went into this project before we even started installing the shoreline. The other project I want to focus on is the reduction of turf, or what I like to call let it grow zones. I also interchange let it grow and no-mow zones. So if I'm saying either one of those, I'm referring to the same area. We have 6 action items that are related to the reduction of turf and the enhancement of no-mow zones with resilient planting. So this supports our education and engagement goal. We did some lunch and learns on this specifically and some signage for the public. The preservation and conservation of natural resources. It helps improve water quality, and it also supports transportation by reducing mowing. So some of the action items I pulled out specifically: enhance selected no-mow zones with pollinator-friendly grassland and savanna species, reduce irrigation of landscapes, implementing resilient plantings and identifying areas to reduce turf, and calculate emission reductions made from creating new no-mow areas. So those are a few of the different action items from those different goals. So I also want to mention with this piece is that not everything that we're doing started in 2023 with the climate action plan. The Metroparks has a mow plan that began around 2014, and this is now continuing to approach a mow plan, but through a climate action lens. So mowing reductions were first implemented throughout the Metroparks around 2008. These areas were left unmowed, and they, as you can imagine, they started to fill in with invasive opportunistic plants like autumn olive and teasel. Mowing started again in 2014. As Jennifer mentioned, there wasn't a standard operating procedure in place, and so it was not quite well received due to the timing of it. Because of the impact to the seasonality of wildlife like grassland nesting birds. So as a response, we created this mow plan so that everyone could be on the same page as far as what areas need to be mowed, when, how frequently, and what other work needs to happen in addition to mowing or not mowing. And again, this was a very collaborative plan that came together with our interpretive staff, our operations staff, maintenance, natural resources, planning. So very collaborative project. And we're continuing to decrease our turf areas into 2025. So this is just a snapshot of what it looks like. We have maps for every park that are designated kind of like the stoplight system. So green means it's regular mow. We've designated that as turf grass for recreation purposes or buffers along roads and trails. The orange or yellow is an annual no-mow, let it grow area. I use all of those a little bit interchangeably. These areas are maintained as open herbaceous land, providing basic habitat for wildlife. And annual mowing is allowed, but it's limited to a window of October 1st to March 1st to reduce impact to wildlife, and hopefully also to minimize invasive shrubs. And then the red areas are what we consider natural areas. These are maintained for native species using a combination of chemical and mechanical methods, including periodic mowing. But it's a little bit more of a collaboration between our maintenance and operations and natural resources departments. So like I said, we're redoing our mow plan right now for upgrades to 2025. So I don't have that data yet, but I just wanted to give a snapshot of our last iteration of updating this mow plan. We had a reduction of 560 acres of mowed turf between 2018 to 2023, which I think is pretty amazing. And these maps show an example of one of those areas. This is our administrative building here at Kensington in Brighton, Michigan. The blue area is mowed turf, and the orange or orangish area is what we consider no mow area. So you see that big reduction from 2018 to 2022. Turf is not all bad though. Like we are, as Jennifer was saying, you know, we're trying to provide areas for all people of Southeast Michigan. So that includes a lot of recreation. We have people that come out for movies in the park, to see fireworks, to play volleyball. So it's really important to keep some of these areas for park users, and then identifying areas here on the right that we can, sometimes it involves a little bit more heavy hand of restoration. So killing off the grass, seeding it. This is our first year of a project that we did at Willow Metro Park. And in the first year, we just had a large field of these black-eyed Susans, which is amazing to see. And I'm looking forward to see how it starts to diversify more going forward in future years. So how is this related to climate action, and also how do we educate the climate action part of it to the public? These areas provide habitat for pollinators and migratory birds. They provide visual interest when native flowering plants become fully established. They help absorb, filter, and distribute rainwater, which includes reduced pollution from entering the watersheds, Lake St. Clair, and ultimately the Great Lakes. We reduce costs and pollution associated with mowing and maintaining areas which are not used for active recreation. And it helps create connections of natural habitats and provides wildlife corridors where animals can move between those habitats safely. This Let It Grow sign is another one from that shoreline at Stony Creek Metro Park. There's a sign that we put in some of these areas. It says, "I'm growing tall to absorb rainwater and runoff, provide pollinator and bird habitat, and benefit climate and water quality." There's a little QR code that park visitors can scan to learn more about these projects. I said in the beginning I would share some challenges with you, and I would say this is one that we've learned from throughout the year. As many on the call are probably familiar with, restoration is not always pretty in the beginning. A lot of times you'll see dead turf for a while, so just brown areas. You might see some weeds or just cover crop that come up in that first year. You have to mow it down in the first year to get rid of annual weeds. And maybe, you know, by year 2, 3, 4, you start to really see the benefits of this process. And so that's sometimes a little bit challenging for both park staff that are used to the manicured lawns or park users. And so we've really focused a lot on that education with the signage, with the lunch and learns. We've provided frequently asked question pages for park staff, blog posts to really try and explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. I have to give a shout out here. One of our goals is to plant 2,000 trees a year, and last year that's one of our aspirational ones. We're ramping up to that 2,000. Last year, though, we got 500 shrubs from the stewardship network, and they were planted in 2024, a lot of them in those no-mow areas by both staff and volunteers throughout the park system. So that, again, supports our natural resources goal, and it also supports our education and engagement through our collaboration with volunteers on those projects. And we have plans for 2025 to plant 500 more trees at Lake St. Clair Metro Park. And hopefully here by 2028, we can ramp up to that 2,000 trees a year. So in summary, you know, we hope you understand the process of developing a climate action plan centered on regional needs and community input. We hope you explore methodologies used in crafting the climate action plan, including stakeholder engagement and goal alignment. We hope you gained insights into the intricacies of executing climate initiatives within a regional park system context. And we hope you discovered some best practices and lessons learned to inspire and empower organizations and communities to initiate their own climate action efforts. Before we go to questions, Jennifer, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I just wanted to add, because I neglected to mention it before, that Each of those action items and the case studies, for example, that Katie was talking about, we have metrics of success, and she mentioned that 2000 tree metric. And so each of our actions do have that metric of success. We do give, or I do, a board update every quarter to the board and to the public so they can see and keep us accountable as to where we are at on our climate action plan. And then on our website right now is the 2024 annual report, and it gives progress onto how successful we are on each of those metrics of success. Thanks. We're opening it up. We do have some questions in the comment section.
Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. That was such a wonderful and in-depth presentation about the entire process. So please, I wanted to remind folks to share your questions via the Q&A function within Zoom. And I also have a couple things for us to start up on, but we will try to get to as many questions as we can here. So for my first part of the question, I really appreciated the way that your presentation was structured, where you talked about the planning process and the input process, and then the importance of putting that plan into action afterwards, right? And I think when somebody is taking on a big initiative like this, it can be really hard to know how long to spend on any given section or what to prioritize. So I'm curious, how did you decide on the amount of time that you would spend on the planning and kind of creation of the plan process versus when did you decide that the document was ready enough for you to start taking action?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, and a lot of it, I would say, I had shared it. It was a steering committee of 15 different people and of all different departments and disciplines. And so a lot of, including myself, we walked into it if you didn't know what you don't know, right? So we really relied on Dr. Bess Perry and her team to give us those foundational components to focus on, really addressing, the ecosystem services and diving deeper into the surveys and gathering that data. And then once all of that was compiled, they synthesized that. It really did not give us much time. It actually came down to when did the contract expire for her and when was the project going to end? And when is our budget cycle? At what point are we wanting to make sure that we can start putting some action in the following year? So that's why we chose October. Our budget cycle ends in it follows the calendar year. So our fiscal year follows the calendar year. So we had to have any major maintenance or capital improvement projects, and even minor projects, the smaller dollar amounts, had to be identified right around October, especially in November. So it's ready to go for our budget in December for approval for the board. So that's what really it came down to. So writing the actions themselves, I think we had 2 months. So the bulk of the meat, right? The real meat of that plan was done in 2 months, but it took us all that other time to really focus, listen, do our research on other agencies' climate action plans, and deciding what we wanted and what we didn't want.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. A related question to that from Bindu is, do you have a sense of how Metroparks staff is feeling about some of the changes that have been made, natural shorelines, changes in turf, etc.? Maybe a bit too early to know fully, but are folks buying in, or do they see the benefits, though it may mean changes to their workflows?
I think it's mixed. I would like to think that it's towards the positive. But we have a lot of staff that's been around for a long time, and sometimes it's hard to see changes to the parks that you mow every day. And so we're hopeful that through the lunch and learns, we can start to explain the benefits of it. Another thing, like the frequently asked questions I mentioned briefly at Lake St. Clair, that was a pretty big project, and it did not, I'm going to be honest, it did not look great year one. It was, a lot of annual weeds that came in. It needed some follow-up work. And so providing that frequently asked questions of how much time do these seeds need to sleep before we start to see them on the landscape? And just really getting questions from them because they're getting the same questions that the park visitors are asking. So we're doing our best to communicate what we can, and also just making really clear expectations of what the first couple years might look like. It might not always be pretty in the beginning, but hopefully in the long term, it's going to be a really big benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I heard a lot you talking about the different ways that you're measuring kind of the baselines and then what you're able to document in terms of the progress that's made, because some of it you might not be able to see with your own naked eye, or some staff might not experience on their day-to-day basis. So, but related to that question, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Katie, did you have something else?
Say, you saying that reminded me of getting park staff buy-in on some of like letting natural resources just kill all their grass. And they did, and I'm really grateful for that. And afterwards we were doing a site visit out there, and they're like, I had never heard like bugs out here. And there's like a deer out on the point in Lake St. Clair. We get a lot of monarchs that migrate through there. So it's afterwards when they start to notice some of those things, I feel like for me that's a success. And we've won when we start to provide more habitat for the pollinators and the wildlife. It feels good for me.
That is amazing. And you basically read my mind and the mind of the person that was asking this next question, which is wondering anecdotally, do you see in your no-mow zones, are people, either, visitors of the park or staff noticing some of these changes that you're talking about? So it sounds like they are, right? Do you have any other examples of folks maybe general visitors to the park, or other anecdotes about the changes that folks are seeing from these initiatives?
I'm going to segue a little bit on your question and say one of our goals for the climate action plan is to use citizen science as a source to track some of these changes. So that's one of our goals, is to collect some of that data. And so we're starting to install chronolog stations in our parks. They're little stands. You put your phone on them, you scan a QR code, you take a picture of a landscape, and then we can collect basically citizen science photo monitoring. So I'm hoping we will get there. I would say we're probably not quite there yet. Jennifer, feel free to jump in if you think otherwise, but I'm really excited about that initiative, so that in a year from now, hopefully I'll have a better answer for you. But that's, again, one of our goals, is how do we measure this? How do we work with the public, communicate it? And those chronolog stations are a really exciting piece of it.
Yeah, when it comes to measuring, I'll just add that we try to, we take both the qualitative and the quantitative, because a lot of times, sometimes you just can't measure it, right? And so you have to take that qualitative approach, and especially when it comes to education, we really take a look at that impact. Like, what is, we want to direct people to do action. So how can someone individually take an action in their own daily life that actually will create an impact in the community? And so that's been a focus of the education pieces. And with that too, so we want to collaborate with other partners and other organizations to help spread the word, right? And get the message out there. And it also helps with resources. We only have so many people who can write those educational components, the blogs, the videos. But when we share and partner with other folks, then the message still gets out there, and we're being good partners.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like that would build a sense of agency with both visitors and staff, right? And making them feel good about the work that's being done. That's awesome. So question from Tina: are the let it grow zones essentially just overgrown turf grass, or do you plant them as a part of the transition? I thought I may have heard an answer, but just wanted to clarify. What's your approach to the let it grow zones?
All of the above.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends. We usually start with just letting the grass grow. Like, we're stopping mowing it, step one. And then as resources become available, we will start to incorporate different methods to encourage more native plants. So we've tried a whole slew of things. We tried herbiciding the turf grass and then seeding it. We don't always have the resources for that. So maybe we start burning them and overseeding them. We do the mowing just, to keep them in a maintenance phase where they're not becoming over dominated with Autumn Olive, for example. So it's a whole spectrum. A lot of the grant funding and things that I'm looking for right now are to help with some of those conversions of just from grown up grass to actual intentional native plantings.
That's great. So a quick technical question, and what does CIS stand for? I don't remember exactly what slide that was from. Do you all recall?
I'm
Patrick's
gonna.
on here. Can you put it in the chat?
It's Patrick Judd.
It's our contractor that we're working with for our carbon storage study, and I'm completely blanking right now. I'm sorry, Patrick.
I know, I'm sorry too.
Earlier.
That is all good. And then maybe our last one before we get to the outro. So a question, have you added infrastructure so the public can really take in the changes that are happening? So for example, benches or picnic tables near some of these habitat improvement projects. So just wondering how you are highlighting these projects to visitors in the park system.
I think not yet. I can't think of any right now, Jennifer, unless you can. Thank you, Patrick. For example, the Stony Creek shoreline, there was a bench where the shoreline was installed, so we moved the bench. So we're creating like little access points within these 80 to 100-foot shorelines, and then little access points in between, because people use that area frequently for paddling as well. So it might be more just rearranging kind of what's there versus installation of new picnic tables and benches.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for folks, just wanted to say CIS Corvias Infrastructure Solutions is what I've got in the chat from Patrick. So thank you very much. Okay, and with that, and a link, thank you very much for that. So with that, I would like to share my screen and do our outros. So thank you once again to both of you for a wonderful presentation. That was absolutely excellent. So now hopefully you are seeing my screen. And we encourage you to become a regular at our TSN monthly webcast. So register for an upcoming episode of interest. They're always on the second Wednesday of the month in the Eastern Time Zone's noon hour. And we will remind you by email if you register. And if you go to stewardshipnetwork.org/webcast, you can register for all of the upcoming webcasts that we have already scheduled. And so go ahead and register for one a couple months ahead if you are interested in doing so. So a couple things to look forward to. In April of 2025, we have 21st Century Stewardship, Infusing Environmental Stewardship with Global Citizenship Education. That's with Ava Goodale at the Deerfield Academy. Then in May of 2025, we have The Armadillos Are Moving, but Carners Are Trapped, Neo-Natives, Managed Relocation, and What to Do About Wildlife Climate Refugees with Chris Hoving of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. And in June of 2025, we have From Litter Box to Land Conservation at Big Rock Valley. That's with Jared Reibel at the Edward Lowe Foundation. So once again, we encourage you to go to stewardshipnetwork.org/webcast to learn about our upcoming webcasts, register for them, and you can also visit that page to look at some of our previous recordings from webcasts that we have done recently. So with that, I would like to say thank you once again to our wonderful presenters. Thank you to everybody that attended today. We appreciate you so very much, and we hope to see you next month. Take care.